Okay, so in here we're going to go ahead and set our project that we've now saved. Right, here's my box, and I'll hit set on the folder, and I'll go in and open scene, and there it is. And now I wanted to touch on how you work in different tool sets and panels. So, for example, with polygons here chosen, I can I can right click. If I hold down just the right mouse click, I'll get these tools for edges, vertices, and faces. See, if I select faces, I can select faces to work with. And those tools have a whole slew of other tools with the polygons. We're going to go over those in more detail. But I kind of want to touch on the interfaces and sort of the basis. So if I swap over to animation up here, I'm going to have much more of my tools based around doing all sorts of little deformers and skinning and joint controls. So I can rig and I can animate. And I wanted to point out some different window sets here that help us with these things. So let's go back. Let's just go on down the line. So let's take a look at animation. Some good animation sets here are like right here. This right here is the animation window. If I grab down here on the time bar, I can move this timeline. And I've got 24 frames of animation down here, and I can do all sorts of little things. I can grab my object and I can set a point of keys here, and I can move my timeline, grab my object and move it, and you see this graph will create a setup that shows movement, where it's going. As you can see, it's moving along the x-axis, and that's what this red curve means. It's going from a 0 point to 39 points over here along the x-axis. And this is a great window. This graph editor for this animation is a great editor for seeing these sort of effects. When we go down to something like polygons, we're much better off utilizing sort of this multi-window where we can see all the different sides of our object. So this top view, it's just a box, so we're not going to see much out of that, but you can see how I've selected the top of the box and the top is selected. These don't show it. But there's also a couple other things. You can hit 4 and 5, and it'll hotkey. So if I want to see just wireframe, you can do that up here too. You can see how it kind of affects right here. I get a shaded box with the 5 key. So there it is right there. See? There's wireframe, shaded, and you can also get this wire out frame, so that even if you unclick things, you can kind of see what's happening. There's also a texture, but we don't have any textures on here yet. Textures are just sort of like colored shaders you wrap around something. We could apply one, because also something that's useful when we're working with a polygon system is, let's just go ahead and cut this window out. You can see that there are rendering editors. The Hypershade is, for example, really important, because the Hypershade will give us our base setups. This is how we put textures on top of things. So if I go over here, and these are all different types of shaders, and we're going to go over these in texture techniques. If I select a Lambert, it'll make a new Lambert. I'll call it Lambert 2. Alright, Lambert 1 is sort of the base default. But let's say I grab this Lambert, and I have my object mode selected. Object mode is just like you can select edges, vertices, and faces. You need to select object mode to select the entire object. and I can right click on my new shader and assign that material to selection. So now it's this. So if I go in here, I click on my Lambert 2, you'll see that over in the attribute editor, we've talked about the attribute editor being where I can make adjustments to things. One of the basic ones here would be color. So I could change this to say green. So now I have a green material and it's applied to my box, which is now green. And I can control that. And I can also kind of adjust it to different levels as I need with HSV or RGB settings, right? So there you go. Pretty important base concepts and tools for working in polygons. The Hypershade also works for all objects, like if you're modeling in NURBS, which we're going to talk about here. NURBS are basically surfaces in this case. They have their own approach. I'm going to go over that as well, kind of separate. Polygons and surfaces, polygons versus NURBS. Surfaces is they're two totally different approaches to creating geometry, whatever it is you're going to make. And pretty much animation, polygons, and surfaces is what we're going to be dealing with the most. Rendering is important later on because then we'll have things like lighting and shading setups and creating cameras and such that we might want in our scenes. But point is, every single one of these windows has more little windows, and it's very important to kind of explore how these work. For now, it's good just to know that these there's different settings that have their place, and if you set up the windows, they help you. So explore these. Like Hypershade can be opened right here. I don't even have to open the Hypershade. I have it open down here, so it won't open. But if I don't have it open, I could just click it, and then I'll get my Hypershade right here. Right. So if I close these, some of these, make some space. Now you can see I've got a nice little setup where I have my shape and I've got all my pieces, and then all I really need is there you go. So now if I want to do a bunch of texture work, this is the place to do it. I've got my window where I can change and adjust my materials. I can select my materials, I can make more, and I can see what effect they're having on my object in Maya. So there's a lot of important ones. This one here, for example, is the outliner. It will show what I have in my scene, which in this case is just still this polycube 1, pcube 1. But I can select them, and when I have a lot of stuff in a scene, this becomes very useful because I can select all of these little pieces right on down the line. So the outliner, which is what this window is, you can also open up through windows. Just go down to outliner, right? The outliner is it's a very useful thing to have, and it helps you keep your naming conventions proper too. So at some point I'd eventually change it from polycube 1. That'd be annoying to have PQ1 through 300 or something. You'd start to name them, and that's the proper way to do it. So yeah, just something to keep in mind is there's all of these, and they all kind of have their own purpose. And some of these settings, you'll see, I'll always talk about them when I go through a process. I'll be like, well, here's the windows I'm going to open up. But they are here, and that's how you access all this stuff. All right.